My name is Matthew Barnes, and I'm from ASG Advisors, and we're the firm helping stand up the California Water Safety Coalition. A quick thank you to our breakout presenters and moderators, and for the questions and discussions that came out of those presentations. Appreciate that very much. I have the pleasure of moderating the panel on cross-sector partnerships this afternoon with Helen Arbogast, Steve Barrow, and Michelle Parker, whom I will introduce in a moment. So cross-sector partnerships, can you all hear me okay? So cross-sector partnerships are commonly understood to be when two or more organizations work together across sectors, think industry, nonprofits, government, to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. They can also be when organizations who share a common cause in keeping kids safe, but through different unintentional injury prevention priorities, come together to leverage each other's strengths, as is the case with our guests today. For our conversation today, I'd like to focus on two lines of inquiry. The first is, what can we, as water safety advocates and a new coalition, learn from other preventable injury efforts? And how do we pull together different, though related, and sometimes competing priorities into a cohesive movement? So I'm joined today by three experienced practitioners in such partnerships. So first, Dr. Helen Arbogast is the director of Safe Kids California and manager of the Injury Prevention Program at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. She has over 20 years experience in prevention education, outreach, and research practice at local and national levels with a focus on pediatric injury prevention. Hi, Dr. Helen. Steve Barrow is the state program director of the California Coalition for Children's Safety and Health and serves on the California Emergency Medical Services Commission. He has been working on children, youth, and family health and safety issues for more than 35 years. He was a member of the team that passed the 1996 California Pool Safety Act and led the team that passed SB 442, designed to advance and update the Pool Safety Act. He's one of the co-sponsors of the current 2022 California prevention legislation, AB 2650, which we'll be learning about tomorrow. And Michelle Parker, thank you, Steve, for joining us. Michelle Parker is the Safe Kids Coordinator for the Inland Empire, based out of Loma Linda University Children's Hospital. Water safety has long been a priority in the work that she does with her coalition agencies, and is something she is very passionate about. Helen, Steve, and Michelle, you all advocate across childhood prevention injury spectrum: drowning prevention, seatbelt and car seat safety, bicycle helmet safety, baby safety, playground safety, medication, poison. I'll start with Helen. What can we learn? What's transferable from the successes and progress made in other preventable injury categories?
I think that's a fantastic question, and it's so valuable for us to learn from other disciplines that are a little bit similar. And so some of the best strategies that we've seen, I think our water safety partners are already doing, right? Utilizing real life stories. Unfortunately, there are families who tragically have loss of life because of preventable injuries. They're always a great tool for educating. They put a face to a statistic, and many times are kind of what seals the deal many times, when we're doing advocacy work as well as education. But I'll tell you something that has been really important for us when we're talking about reaching out beyond our kind of comfort zone with other partners is consider the people who you wouldn't think about. Meet families where they are. And if that means partnering with a local church where there's already trust established, where you don't have to plan the party, get the people to come to the party, buy the food, you really just have to show up. That's a big piece of it. And being incredibly inclusive. And that's really hard for us to say in California because people tend to have assumptions of what Californians are. And if you look from one end of the state to the other, we're very different. Our diversity looks different depending on where we are. And be inclusive means different types of effort. And so I would say, having that communication, shared goals and benefits, not just goals. Like, why should I care? Why should I participate? What's the benefit of me coming to this? And so when you find people that are like-minded and willing to work towards the common goal, which all of us have, is keeping children and families safe, I think it's a lot easier sell.
Thank you, Dr. Helen. Steve, over to you. What can we learn from the successes and progress made in other preventable injury categories that your organization's working on?
Got to hit my mute button there. Yeah, following suit on what Helen has said, one of the things we always have to keep in mind is that we all come from a common root source, and that is unintentional injury is a leading cause of death and hospitalization for children between the ages of 0 up through 19. And so it's not like when we're working on drowning or working on teens driver safety or working on poisoning or sleep suffocation. I think it's important for us to remember that we have a common root, and that is back to unintentional injury. We're laser focused through the various cross-sector programs that we've put together on ending unintentional injury as a leading cause of death and hospitalization. And so that for us, we had just come off when we did the Residential Pool Safety Act in 1996. We knew that was just going to be one step on the drowning prevention. We had already worked on other things about drowning prevention, but we had just come off of the bicycle helmet law success. We just come off of the crib safety success, the Crib Safety Act, Playground Safety Act, other settings where we had to work with private industry, state agencies, the court system, which ended up being critical for a couple of those. And then the hundreds and hundreds of different types of injury prevention groups that sometimes were laser focused on their own area, their own silo. But when you ask them for a small bit of help here or there, they're willing to do that. You're not asking them to lose their focus, but you're asking them to help with this other branch of the same common tree that we're all working on. So I think when, remembering our foundation is all the same. It's as Helen said, keeping kids safe and families safe. Meeting people where they're from. This is the most geographically diverse state in the United States. We're the largest. A lot of people forget that we're 85% rural, meaning we have a lot of unserved communities, and we have to pay attention to them. We have a lot of different kind of cultural, we're really rich in cultural and immigration communities, and that makes us so strong, but it also makes you have to pay attention. And so those are some opening comments I would have, and then I can get in later, we'll get into some specifics. How did we get a big win on an area by being cross-sector oriented?
Great. Yeah, we look forward to hearing that, Steve. Michelle, would you care to reflect on a specific example of learnings from other injury prevention categories in the Inland Empire that could be applicable, useful for our thinking as we're standing up this coalition?
I think one of the big hurdles that we have in injury prevention is that the barrier that people think that it's not going to happen to them. And so Helen mentioned bringing families in to illustrate. Sometimes that's not possible to do in all times that we're doing prevention. But I agree that that's a fantastic use of past somebody's experience who's willing to share. But what I found is that most people have a near miss story when it comes to water safety. And so kind of helping them to reflect on that and asking, what is your experience in and around pools or lakes, depending on where you are, where they are, right? And almost everybody that I've talked to has said, oh, I remember this one time when a child went into the pool, nobody saw, nobody heard, but then they saw and they, acted. And so really reflecting on those things for me has been a really neat inroads because the successes are, the outcomes are good, obviously, in these cases. So to me, that's a really good strategy.
That's super helpful. I think everyone in this room find themselves in a circumstance of bringing together groups of people or individuals who have different priority sets and have to navigate the way of establishing priorities, establishing an agenda, and yet keeping people engaged and on board. So I'll ask you, Steve, could you talk a little bit about agenda setting? And there are only so many eyeballs in California. There's only so much mind share that you can access. So how do you think about agenda setting, prioritization, and scope? Again, we're looking sort of practical insights for this coalition, because some of what we're describing is going to be true here too, right? There's so many facets to this challenge, but yet we need to set an agenda, set priorities, and move forward.
Yeah, it's funny. Helen and I in an earlier meeting today were just talking about that very thing of how do we make sure that we're listening to the different perspectives. And but at the same time, we can't just keep talking and we can't just keep researching. We're literally drowning in data on knowing where we should be going generally on a lot of these issues. The drowning prevention community is an extremely great example of cross-sector, and this coalition building that's going on around water safety for California, cross-sector. Residential pool drowning is a whole different animal than open bodies of water in a lot of respects. A lot of similarities. The drowning is is a brain injury issue that we're all struggling with. But how you get to those two areas. One of the things we did back in 1991, and then in 2010 we started again, and in 2013 we launched a thing that would help us bring cross-sector people together constantly, and that's the California Unintentional Injury Prevention Strategic Plan Project. It's this horribly named big project, but what it did is it brought together people working on burns, poisoning, falls, young child window falls, traffic safety, bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, drowning, open bodies of water, residential pool. But we created that unintentional injury project so that we would constantly remind each other that one is we have that common root that we're coming from, unintentional injury, but that there's a lot of specific issues. And then within each issue, as Helen was saying, we have to pay attention to the different communities, the families, the parents, the kids, the different age kids from the different communities where they reside. And so we created the Unintentional Injury Strategic Plan Project so that we would constantly be kind of forced under the project umbrella to work together. And that's why we'll never let go of that. And we're working on ways of keeping it funded on into the future. So that's one thing. Some of the big successes we've had, playground safety regs. Used to have 300,000 severe enough injuries in our state from playground settings that, and a couple dozen deaths every year, that we needed to change that, but we were having the agencies responsible for that not reacting, and the legislature only willing to go so far. So we brought the courts in. We partnered cross-sector with the courts. The court said, no, state, there's too much injury going on here. You have to do something. And so we ended up with the playground safety regs. We're now down to tens of thousands of severe injuries on playgrounds. We're not at the bottom yet, but we had to involve the private sector that built that, local government sector, court sector, advocates from different viewpoints to work together on that. And we had to bring together communities, very poor communities who were saying, how the heck are we gonna fund changing our playgrounds? So we always have to be thinking about how broad this is, but not be afraid to not just keep talking about things, but to move forward.
No, that's helpful, Steve. I'm going to ask Helen to jump in. Steve and Michelle have been alluding to this common root notion. Have you found that useful in bringing people together, and how are you thinking about agenda setting and prioritization? That's part one of the question. And then I'd love for you to reflect on how either your organization, Safe Kids California, or our organization how we can plug into each other's work. So agenda setting, prioritization, and then how we might work specifically with the California Safe Kids Coalition.
All right, so that's a three-pronged question. I'm going to try to answer it as best as I can. I am a fan of data, but I don't like for us to get caught up in the data, right? So many of us who do injury prevention work, whatever the topic area is, you probably are a lone soldier. And that means you're doing a lot of heavy lifting. So one of the ways I like to prioritize resources is looking at data. Where are most of the injuries happening? What population are we seeing the largest disparities in? So that's how I would first say, I've got limited resources, limited manpower. I'm going to get to who needs me the most and where it happens the most to hopefully have the greatest impact. So I think in that sense, data really helps drive the way that you strategize your outreach and education. I'll give you an example. For us in Los Angeles, our Black and Brown communities are the ones who have the highest rates of near drowning, submersion. And so we tend to find that that does happen in private residences, but also on the rare occasion that people are going to the beach, to open bodies of water. And so we try to target our education efforts regionally in that way. And I think that's a great way to kind of prioritize. The other piece of it is looking at expanding your manpower, right? And a great way to do that is work with people who are already doing work with either the same topic or the same population. So water safety folks should always partner with child passenger safety folks, because by and large, children under the age of 5 are at the highest risk many times for drownings and submersions. And so if we could get our child passenger safety partners on board with water safety, we are addressing the message twice. So every time a person comes in for a car seat inspection, if it's April, I know May is when we're going to get some of our first cases, right? Unfortunately. And so we start to push the message about water safety. And I know California is very warm a lot of times, and so we don't really have a season for this, but we know when it starts to peak. And so we have to kind of tap our partners who work in other areas who might work with the same population to extend our reach. And how that works with Safe Kids California is we have coalitions up and down the state that are doing these topics already. In some degree, it might look different, but they're already doing work in any of these areas. And so if you are in California, working in California, which I assume everyone who's participating in this conference is, tap into a local Safe Kids coalition and either start doing work with them. If it's a child passenger safety event, say, hey, can I come out and talk about water safety? It's getting to be that time of the year. They would happily welcome you. They might not be able to do the additional education, because if you've ever been to a car seat check event, it's like a circus, right? We're trying to hurry up and get it through. But if you're also bringing a resource, they would welcome you. So I hope that kind of talks a little bit to the, planning, using data, prioritizing, and doing some capacity building, because what ultimately happens is cross-fertilization in a way that you didn't think about. So if a water safety professional comes to a car seat check event and does education, goodness, we're going to hear that information and remember it even if they're not there the next time. Perhaps they leave some materials behind if they can't make it to the next event that we can just put at registration and pass out to families. I hope that helps.
Super helpful. And I think what I'm also hearing is there's an opportunity for us to tap into your set of stakeholders and present at opportune times about water safety, landscape, drowning prevention, et cetera. So I think there's a concrete example of ways that we can be collaborating with your organization. I'm hoping that we will have time for some questions from the audience, but let me ask this, and can I put it to any of you to jump in? Can you reflect on organizational structures that you think work particularly well in keeping partnerships like these moving forward? You know, in some cases you have what are called like a backbone function or a secretariat, which is a team that does the coordination of the various priorities, et cetera, and makes sense of it and helps facilitate agenda setting, et cetera. Maybe you reflect on your organizational structure or those that you might admire and think work well. Steve, would you like to jump in?
One of the things that we have to remember is that this is not an area where anybody that's going to work in this area is going to get wealthy. But we do need to have paid staff, and we have to have leadership that a lot of times leadership will be coming out of a different structure where they are paid in their day-to-day job. Helen's at Children's Hospital, Michelle's at Loma Linda. But we have to, I think you've got to pay attention to, you can't get some of the work done only by volunteer, although volunteers is a backbone for us on the ground at the community level. But we have got to, when you're building an organization, you've got to figure out how do you sustain or institutionalize at least a core part of your function, of your funding, so that you can keep the core mission moving and things moving. You have to staff up. And that's one thing that I think that the coalition will have to pay attention to. How do you institutionalize the core funding that the coalition is going to need? I mean, you'll have us joining who are from other settings and from cross sectors, putting our shoulder to the wheel of the drowning prevention coalition as it matures. But the coalition itself has got to be able to hold its own. Yeah. And so that's one of the things we're going to have to pay attention to.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, that my own personal experience bears that out, that having a dedicated, ideally paid person who or a group of people have day-to-day responsibility. There's really no substitute for that. Michelle, your thoughts as it relates to organizational structure and what might be, what works particularly well in your context?
For me, I've had a lot of really good luck in working with people who hate to respond to these kinds of things, right? Fire, EMS, they don't want to go on these calls because they're relatable and they're heart wrenching sometimes. And so tapping into people who have a stake in the prevention can also really be helpful, and keeping everybody engaged, on a year-round basis. We never stop talking about water safety in our coalition as part of our monthly meetings because, as Helen said, even though there's peak times, it never really goes away entirely. We've had submersions in December that ended awfully. We've had, slower months in May. You never kind of know. But one thing's for sure, I make it a priority to be sure that the people in my coalition who show an interest in water safety and whatever their skill sets are, I bring them in at every opportunity that I get. So if we're doing a press event and I have somebody in my coalition who's a really great MC because he has a background in radio and things like that, then I'm going to utilize him, right? If I have somebody who's really great at who does community theater, guess what? We set up kind of vibrant, I don't want to call them a skit, but kind of some kind of example during a press event so that brings things to life and make them in charge of that. And we all kind of get together and do something that makes sense, something that makes sense and engages people. And I think just keeping that engagement at a high level is really important.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So we have 5 minutes remaining. I'm going to check with the audience to see if there's any questions. I have another one just in case. Julie Lopiccolo, we're going to bring you a mic.
Hey, Julie.
Hi, Steve. Okay, so my question is actually for Steve. When you said you need to think about how to institutionalize funding, I don't know what you mean by that. Maybe everyone else in the room does, but can you expand on that a little bit?
Briefly.
Please.
How to institutionalize funding? Yeah, I mean, look at kids' plates. Jackie Spear, when she was in the assembly, and we needed a way of institutionalizing to underwrite the child care licensing system in California. Well, we ended up with something that was going to raise a little bit more money than we needed for that. And so you're always thinking about how can you work with the state to institutionalize things. And then also we should be looking at our large health-focused foundations. They used to give a lot. Cole Foundation, the endowment, the healthcare foundation used to give a lot more money to unintentional injury, and we need to get back and partnering with them. But we would like to have them have an institutionalized arm inside their thinking, just like we would like to have inside the government structure wherever we can, like kids' plates is a, drivers buy those plates, goes into a special fund, and then we fund 3 different types of child safety stuff. And it's not much money, but we've raised over $50 million in the life of that plate. It's meaningful money. So always trying to find a way to institutionalize. So in drowning prevention, it would be great to get some of the service clubs to dedicate a certain amount of their percentage of their big statewide organizations, like the Rotarians do that for eyeglasses. They do it for dental health and stuff like that. But you're always looking for places to not just get a one-time funding source. How do you put it into law? How do you put it into their charter so that when they have money, we know that there will be at least a baseline of money to support the types of programs that are so hard to fund, the community-based safety programs.
Thanks for that, Steve.
I hope I got in the ballpark there, Julie.
Did he answer your question? Yeah. I was going to, Michelle or Helen, anything you'd like to add as it relates to organizational sustainability, staying viable, getting proper funding for the long term?
It's not necessarily funding, but it definitely is resource support. And I'll share with you something that we do that I encourage everyone who works near a school, a college, a university that has a school of public health, a school of nursing. These young people are required to do internship hours, and we have maximized on that opportunity, and we take on about 10 interns a summer. It's insane. I totally get it. But if you take on 1 or 2, that's 1 or 2 more people that can be there for 10 weeks, 40 hours a week to help you do what you're doing. It is a win-win. Sure, there's a lot of effort that goes on to onboarding and teaching them things, but we're teaching, right? That's kind of our gig. And if we're able to tap into that manpower, that free resource, if you do it every year like we've done, the schools now look to us. We're actually interviewing our interns right now. We've got 10 slots. We've done over 100 interviews. And so young people are traveling from everywhere for the experience. So that would be a great way to get resources that are from the community. And that's another really important piece of it, right? Making sure that the people who are going into these communities and do the education look like the community they're going into. Injury prevention is a very, forgive me for saying it to all my colleagues, but it's a very white industry. And California is not all white. And so when we think about going into communities of color, we want to remove that barrier. And sometimes the first step is just having somebody who looks like them, talks like them, so that they can kind of let their guard down and not feel judged, and it really be an effective education interaction.
Thank you, Helen. So we're at just about time. I have one final question. It was suggested by my colleague Will earlier today. Can you just give lightning round here, kind of an example of an unexpected partner, someone who came into the fold unexpectedly, maybe uninvited initially, but very much welcome. Just give us a couple examples, because that might be things we can learn from. Steve, very quickly, and then Helen, and then Michelle, please.
The insurance companies of California have been amazing in helping to underwrite both for political reasons and money into things, but that partnership has to be nurtured. So that was one. The pool builders have been amazing. It used to be that we are always fighting against them whether or not drowning was a real issue, and now the Association of Pool Builders are partnering with how do we structure and move forward, which is great, but it took a long time to get there.
Two great examples. Michelle.
I'm going to say one of our champions, one of our own pediatricians who has a very far reach with her residents and fellows, and they really help us tease out the data that we collect through our submersion incident report form and turn it into poster presentations and then try to publish that. And then Kiwanis has been a great partner for me. I've been able to offer swimming lessons for kids through their funding and even focus on kids with special needs, which is a whole, important topic within this topic.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, we know our pediatricians are essential. Dr. Helen Arbogast, final
Sure.
contribution.
So I would suggest law enforcement. We've done some fantastic things with LAPD, especially around community engagement, because a lot of our law enforcement partners are looking to build better community rapport, and that could mean any topic that we need to work on. And then the other group that is unique to California that we don't tap into enough are our disaster preparedness and earthquake people. When they're talking about, the Great California Shakeout and having a disaster plan, they're talking about home safety, and we can easily fold in water safety along with that conversation. So just might be a great partner. Our safety officer, who was in our hospital for many years, was one of our best advocates and pulled us into earthquake safety. And we ended up doing so much home safety work together that we taught each other. So it was really unexpected and welcomed. So try anything. The ice cream guy at the corner wants to, hold an event, listen to them because people are coming. Go to wherever they are.
Thank you. So Helen, Steve, Michelle, a very simple but heartfelt thank you for your contributions today in this discussion.